time for them to pray and bless me on behalf of everybody here.
Ìbà olórí ẹ̀yọ̀. Mo fẹ́ ikú lọ. Èyí wá gbọ́. Ire owó, ire ọmọ, ire àlàáfíà. Ìlú yìí ò ní ìdàrú. Bí mo ti kọ́lé. Bí mo dẹ̀ ráyè. Wá!
That was meant to show you that taxmen and women do have fun. Yes, they are human beings after all. They have water and blood running through their veins. It's not only about collecting taxes, accounting for taxes, chasing after recalcitrant taxpayers. No. This is part 2 of our story of the International Conference on Tax in Africa, held under the auspices of ATAF, African Tax Administration Forum, which held in Abuja between Tuesday the 26th and Friday the 29th of September 2017. We recall that in part 1 of this story last episode, we told you that day 2 of the 4-day conference was capped with a gala night, at which delegates from all over Africa and other parts of the world were given the opportunity to unwind and to experience Nigeria. And talking about experiencing Nigeria, we are sure that you know that that 4-day conference was held on the eve of Nigeria's 57th independence anniversary. And so our cap and our search are meant to speak volumes, to convey a message to you. We love Nigeria. And that's our chat to you. Love Nigeria. Own Nigeria. Nigeria now we own. We are better off together. Happy Independence Anniversary, Nigeria. Happy birthday.
It's a new dawn in Nigeria, and the mantra is change. The wind of change is blowing all over Nigeria and beckons to you. One sure way to respond is to perform your civic duty. Pay your tax. With taxes, government generates revenue to fulfill its electoral promises, ensure regular power supply, provide good security, standard education, medical care, through total change. Individuals and corporations enjoy specific benefits, rights and privileges for paying taxes and avoid the consequences and penalties of not paying. Oil revenue is no longer sufficient to bring desired change, but your tax can. It pays to pay your tax. A message from the Federal Inland Revenue Service.
Welcome back. The program is Tax Matters, and what we are about on this episode is to continue our story of the 4-day International Conference on Tax in Africa held under the auspices of ATAF in Abuja from Tuesday the 26th to Friday the 29th of September 2017. Let's get down to serious business. How do we build stronger tax regimes in Africa? How do we strengthen value-added tax, personal income tax, and companies income tax? That was the theme of the 4-day conference. And as we told you last episode, over the 4 days of the conference, there were 15 intellectually stimulating sessions, all centered around the theme of the conference. We shared with you excerpts from some of the panel sessions last episode. We want to serve you more today.
In the morning, we heard that Africa is too rich to be poor. We also heard that government budget deficits in most African countries is on the increase, and that Africa has abundance of natural resources. Can Africa win itself from donor syndrome, where in most African countries the budget contribution from donor or cooperating partners is higher than the domestic resources that can be collected? It is also true ladies and gentlemen, that the strength of any government is seen in its ability and capacity to mobilize domestic resources. If a government cannot mobilize resources for its expenditure, that government is weak in reality.
There's a tendency to look at, a strong domestic tax regime in the context of the large taxpayers and the big players in the market. But if you look at the structure of the African, majority of the African economies, there's a very heavy informal sector. So if we have to look at the wider structure of the tax system, we need also to address the informal sector. And I think that is where the tax culture really comes in, because people need to get value for money, people need to know why they're paying.
There are three important legs in what we do. The first one is education. Do we go out there, do we educate the population in terms of the obligation? Do we have a proper service? The ones that are paying their taxes, that are trying to be compliant, do they have to stand in long queues to pay their dues? Or do you have systems and processes in place that make it easier for them to comply? And then lastly, when we do enforcement, are we applying the penalty regime as we should be? Are we consistent in making use of the penalties to make examples of high-profile individuals that need to be addressed on public forums to send a message that tax evasion will not be tolerated?
Allow me to open the discussion to the panel, to the plenary. Can I have anyone from the plenary who would want to share how in their administration they have harnessed revenue from the informal sector? We hear from my colleague here that in their country they have abolished the name informal sector, which we have also done in Zimbabwe. We don't have informal sector. We have micro enterprises, and that's how we relate to them so that they feel more formal than informal.
We must sincerely embrace the challenge of evolving a tax system which majority of the populace will be able to relate with. So we must acknowledge that the formal structure that we have now is not operable at that level. We must get the buy-in of the informal sector through incentives. If you don't know who they are, if they are not registered in any way, you cannot tax them.
I think one major thing all stakeholders in the Nigerian project need to support to encourage payment of taxes by that segment of our economy is to join hands to promote the financial inclusion strategy of the government of the day, especially the Financial System Strategy 2020. If we bring more of the operators in that segment into the banking net, it will be much easier to bring them to the tax net. We have identity problem in the environment, and I believe it's not only the Nigerian environment, in most African economies, where we have duplication of identities. You have your driver's license, it's different identity. You have your international passport, it's a different one. You have voter's card, etc., etc. If we can harmonize the identity and use the financial inclusion strategy and the platform of the Financial System Strategy 2020, we will have the automation that my brother here spoke about much easier for all the segments of the environment. We will have it much easier for that segment, most of them outside the banking system today, to come into the banking system. It will be much easier to deploy automation devices to collect taxes, either on daily basis or weekly basis from them. All the leakages we are talking about it becomes much easier, as it has happened in Lagos State, to block substantially those leakages, because the automated system will have encouraged those who are already in the banking net to use the devices provided by the banking system to pay into the government cover.
Interesting. Listen to this charge from the panel chairman.
Corruption, it must be dealt with so that we are seen to be very people that with high integrity. And as tax collectors, let's always follow the footprints of money. Money leaves footprints, and the taxman who does not follow the footprints of money becomes irrelevant in due process and time.
Section 4 was aptly captioned Tax Administration, going back to the basics. Going back to the basics.
For me, the topic going back to the basics should help us to understand on a daily basis, what are we taxing? Who are we taxing? Where are they? And take a simple example of having your records and being able to register taxpayers and make sure that your taxpayer register is up to date. When you don't have that, then you can go fancy in whatever way, but you are not going to achieve your result. And I've seen cases where we should be learning from examples of other systems that have been built, which are not necessarily from the tax side, but they have all the information. I think a good example is in Tanzania. For a long time, they have a system called Nyumba Kumi, which means 10 households. And in that grouping of 10 households, the local administrator, and therefore the chain up to the top, they will know what is happening in that 10 household. And it builds as a pyramid, and they have all the information, So what happens when it comes to dealing with taxpayers? Where does that simple concept go? We've talked about technology, but really technology should come later. What matters is people and their attitude about even being able to use the tools that are available. I've seen in countries where they've invested billions of dollars in IT. You come back 4 years later, the system has collapsed. The data is not there. You go into another country, they started from zero. They've used their internal resources, and they are building their small software, which is helping them till they get, the big amounts. I've also had examples of where you concentrate on training auditors. The enforcement people, you give them all the skills. But guess what? You've failed to organize your archives. So all the audits that are being done, all the files, all the records, nobody knows where they are. Where are you going to enforce? Using what tools? So I tell my colleagues, whom we've worked together for a long time, that, for example, if you come up with a new building today and you tell the tax administration to go into that new building, will they first allocate offices to people and then think of where the archives to go? Or they will first say, the archives will be in this space, which is secure, and then the staff will go around it. What kind of tax administration are you running? If you don't have a taxpayer register, if you don't have the archives, if your records are not secure, you know, you can spend all the resources, you can have a good IT system, but a good software, very good machinery, empty inside. You know, so the discipline of making sure that all those files are prepared and are secure, and all the information, whatever you collect, you put it into the system, and therefore it can be accessed. Very important.
What I gather across from what they've said, we all seem to have taxpayer identification numbers in our countries. How have we been using them? We have businesses, before they will operate, they need to register with the Registrar General or the Corporate Affairs Commission. How is the relationship between the revenue and these bodies? And like consultant from Canada has indicated, if you don't build the data, when even you want to prosecute, what are the evidence you are going to present? And so we want to come back to you to see what direction you can give us. It is not only about the systems. The people to manage the systems matter. Because the basic mistake in IT systems is that garbage in, garbage out. So if we don't manage the data to go in correctly, it will give us wrong results. So over to you, our audience, if you can share with us your experiences.
I think in Africa, it's a double jeopardy for the tax administrators. They have to deal with the issue of identity management and also the challenges of collecting taxes. And it's even more compounded when you look at our environment. The data integrity is very crucial to administration of taxes. You need to be able to identify who is the taxpayer before you begin to evaluate the income that is subject to tax. I believe that what we have in Nigeria is not different from what happens in many African countries, where you have various authorities. Every person wanted to be involved in tax collection. And at the end of the day, you do not really know who the taxes are to be collected from. If we have a system that runs where you are saddled with just the responsibility of tax administration, like you have in the United States, identity management is managed by the Social Security. Once you have your Social Security number, that forms your ID. Whereas here in Nigeria, you have birth registration, you have BVN, you have national identity, you have PENCOM, you have CAC, and the tax authority have to deal with all of this, and then it creates its own database of tax identification number. And in most cases, you cannot even reconcile this.
We have cashless economy. As a taxman, don't collect cash from the taxpayers to reduce fraud and leakages. What happened in rural area where you don't have bank and you don't have network and the rest? What is the practice in other African countries that share this similar, problem?
One key thing that I'm suggesting we do as tax administration is to first understand who we are. What role do we play? That way it gives us an idea of how we can contribute effectively. If I could ask us, a lot of us may not be so sure that we are in the service industry because we are so used to the fact that we collect taxes. When people see us, they run away. They say tax collectors are here. They are afraid of us. But that has to change. Because when you are in the service industry, there are key things you need to do. You need to collaborate. You need to map out your stakeholders and look for a way to reach out to them effectively. And part of the recommendation would be for us to look beyond the issue of audits, filing, registration. Taxpayer service is key. what kind of service do you give to the taxpayer out there? It can go a long way. The front office can go a long way encouraging people to get into the tax net.
I think gathering from the plenary section, there is the key issue of the data integrity, data management. For multiple IDs, I think it's a common problem across Africa. You have driver's license, voter's ID, social security, citizenship card. Help me. Which one again? You have your bank too has ID, a lot of IDs. Very soon we'll be holding IDs for our wives and our husbands. So it is good we have only one ID.
As you can see, even as you have not been served the proceedings of all the 15 sessions, ideas flowed. Concepts were examined and re-examined. Old concepts were re-evaluated. New concepts came up. And all with the aim of strengthening tax administration in Africa. And so, beyond the panel discussions, Tax Matters spoke to some of the delegates to get more from them. In what ways do you think that the ideas exchanged, the knowledge passed across at this conference can push us further towards our goal of, like the team says, building strong tax economies across Africa?
Well, I think what you've seen a lot of here is very high quality participation and peer learning between the different countries. So we've seen many solutions to some of the problems adopted by different countries, and that sharing of knowledge will be critical to allow all African countries to find those types of solutions. We've also, I think, seen a very positive discussion about the need for tax policy reforms and starting to develop cohesive, coordinated approaches for African tax policy positions.
Certainly what we've seen here is that from an ITAF perspective, there's many structures created that support knowledge sharing, and we have the example of the cross-border tax committee. We have the VAT tax committee that brings together African specialists that work to find solutions for African countries. So from a perspective of knowledge sharing in general, what you've seen here also is countries have unique solutions. Some of those are also applicable to their neighbors or countries within the same region. For instance, you might find that there's solutions in Nigeria, you can apply them in Ghana, or you can apply them across Africa. So I think the forum like this draws together the opportunity to bring together the different skills and experiences of people.
And of course, the current Executive Chairman FIRS, Chairman Joint Tax Board of Nigeria, and Chairman African Tax Administration Forum, Mr. Batunde Fowler. Have you been impressed with the level of participation? I mean, we have 38 member countries. How has it been these past 3 days?
Very, very enlightening, very enjoyable. We have had very robust discussions, and I think it's, without prejudice, one of the best conferences that have been held so far.
We wonder, the knowledge that has been shared, the ideas that have been exchanged, are you convinced that they will move us closer to our goal of building stronger tax economies across Africa?
Well, certainly. With even the last activity that we just had, with the launching of that book on transfer pricing, especially in the mining sector, that book alone is enough to transform the financial profile of Africa. So certainly a lot of discussions have gone by, a lot of new ideas have come into play, and I'm sure as the Commissioner Generals go back to their respective nations, they're going back with a lot of new ideas.
The story of the 3rd International Conference on Tax in Africa continues on Tax Matters. In the meantime, it's time to go, but that's only for today. Keep a day with us next week, same station, same day of the week, same time of the day. Remember, for information and education on taxation, Tax Matters is the program to watch. See you next week.